Distilled spirits. What are distilled spirits? Regulations say ethyl alcohol, hydrated oxide of ethyl, spirits of wine, whiskey, rum, brandy, gin, and other distilled spirits, including dilutions and mixtures thereof for non-industrial use. And that's 27 CFR 5.11. It also includes mixtures of distilled spirits and wine that are bottled at 24% alcohol by volume or greater, where the mixture contains not more than 50% wine on a proof gallon basis. What many people might not know is that your distilled spirits can contain wine. For instance, I'll touch on it more later, but there's certain classes and types of distilled spirits that can contain wine and do not have to disclose that they contain wine on the label. Distilled spirits can't have finished beer in them, though. They can have finished wine, but not beer. Distilleries can use beer as a distilling material, but they can't use it, I'm going to take my favorite brewery's IPA and dump it into my vodka. Can't do that, but they could take the IPA and distill it and make it into a distilled spirit. Fortified wines, things like port, sherry, vermouth, are not distilled spirits. Those are wines fortified with brandy or other spirits. In the United States, you need to use the same type of commodity for, that's for the definition of wine, but basically fortified wines in the U.S., if you have a grape wine, you need to use grape spirits or spirits distilled from fruit. You can't use neutral grain spirits. It needs to be kind of kind, otherwise it will be disclosed on the label. So, grape wine with neutral citrus spirits. Next, going down to the class and type designations for distilled spirits. These are some, but not all of them. You have your vodka, whiskey, gin, brandy, rum, tequila, mezcal, liqueur and cordial, flavored vodka, flavored whiskey, flavored gin, flavored brandy, flavored rum. Seriously, there is no class and type designation for flavored tequila. So if you ever see like cinnamon tequila products out there, there's no cinnamon flavored tequila. It's a distilled spirit specialty. That's a class and type that none of these other. It's not vodka, it's not whiskey, it's not flavored vodka. It's sort of like a catch-all category. If it doesn't fit into any other category, it goes into distilled spirit specialty, which cinnamon tequila is a good example. Your recognized cocktails and imitation products. Imitation products, you don't see those too often. Sometimes you'll see some imitation flavored vodkas. That just means that they are using some artificial flavoring ingredient instead of all natural flavors, which I'll get into in a minute. Right. So next is, bringing it down even further, the standard of identity for distilled spirits. I'm going to go through the main general class definitions. So neutral spirits or vodka can be distilled from absolutely anything. You can make neutral spirits from grain, you can make them from apples, you can make them from sugar, you can make it from honey. There's no restriction on what you can make them from. You have to distill it to at least 190 proof. And again, proof is alcohol by volume doubled. So it has to be at least 95% alcohol. And if they are bottled, they don't have to be bottled. It cannot be bottled at less than 80 proof. Whiskey is the next one. And there are a lot of subtypes within whiskey, and we'll get to that in a moment. But whiskey must be distilled from a fermented mash of 100% grain. So it can be 100% corn, 100% rye, 75% rye and 25% corn, 100% barley malt, whatever. But it has to be made from 100% grain. It must not be distilled to more than 189.9999 proof. It must be distilled to less than 190 proof. It must be stored in oak and bottled at not less than 80 proof. And what TB means by stored in oak, it can sort of differ depending on who you're talking to, but at least to classify as whiskey, the product must touch wood. It must be stored or somehow be in a wood-like container. The amount of time, at least touch wood, has to be in there for something more than a nominal amount of time, like more than 2 seconds. Next is brandy. It's distilled from the fermented juice, mash, or wine of fruit to less than 190 proof, and must be bottled at not less than 80 proof. Rum, which is distilled from fermented sugar cane to less than 190 proof and bottled at not less than 80 proof. So one thing, notice that the only difference really between, besides the aging portion for whiskey, any of these products, if they're distilled to 189.9 proof, it'll still be whiskey, brandy, or rum. You distill it to 190, it becomes neutral spirits, and it's no longer whiskey, brandy, or rum. Tequila, it's distilled in Mexico. You can't make a tequila in the U.S. You can import bulk tequila from Mexico and bottle it and sell it, but you can't make a product and call it tequila in the United States. You can make agave spirits. You can get really inventive and try to make a name that sort of sounds like tequila, but you can't make tequila yourself in the United States. You just can't. Next is gin, which is distilled spirits. It's distilled or mixed with juniper berries and other botanicals, but juniper berries must be the main characteristic flavor. It must be bottled at not less than 80 proof. Then are liqueurs or cordials. Basically, it's just any class of distilled spirits mixed with natural flavors. And by that they mean, fruits, juices, spices, herbs, things like that, or compound flavors from a flavor house that are classified as TTB natural. It must have not less than 2.5% sugar by weight of the finished product. May not have artificial flavors at all. If there are artificial flavors, then it becomes imitation liqueur. Next class are flavored vodka, whiskey, brandy, gin, rum. They're all more or less the same. There are some slight differences between them, but basically it's the specific class of distilled spirits with natural flavor, and it must be bottled at not less than 60 proof and labeled with a predominant flavor. So if you can have a honey flavored vodka, or as this category has kind of exploded in the last few years, you've got bacon flavored vodka. We've seen a scrapple flavored vodka, popcorn flavored vodka. There's all kinds of different flavored vodkas out there, and you just need to label the product with its predominant flavor. Whatever flavoring you're using to create that flavor, list it as the predominant flavor. If it's bottled at less than 60 proof, then it would become a distilled spirit specialty. Next is recognized cocktail. It's basically a trade or consumer recognized mixed drink made with one or more of the classes of types of distilled spirits we've talked about before, with flavors or colors. And as we'll see, what TTB thinks are recognized cocktails by trades and consumers are different than what everyone else might think of as recognized cocktails. And last is distilled spirit specialty, which is distilled spirits not defined under any other class and or any other type of class and type treated with non-traditional ingredients or processes. So let's take a closer look at some of these. We could probably spend 3 hours going through each last type of distilled spirit, but we'll just focus on some of the main ones here. So whiskey is the sort of umbrella class. There are types within that. These are more specific types of whiskey. The 5 that I've listed here, that's not an exhaustive list. There's over 35 distinct types of whiskey, but I'm just going to hit on some main ones so you can see the difference between them. So bourbon whiskey. It's whiskey, so again, something distilled to less than 189 proof, blah, blah, blah. It's produced in the U.S. from fermented mash of not less than 51% corn. So your bourbon can have 51% corn and 49% malted barley, or it can have 99% corn or 100% corn, but it has to be at least 51% corn. It must be distilled to not more than 160 proof, so that differentiates already from regular whiskey, which has to be less than 190. And it must be stored at not more than 125 proof in charred new oak containers. And TP is very specific about those charred new oak containers. If you're storing bourbon whiskey not in charred new oak containers, if you're storing it in used containers or uncharred containers, it's not bourbon whiskey. And it must be bottled at not less than 80 proof, just like every other whiskey. So all these must be bottled at not less than 80 proof. Straight bourbon whiskey. So that's bourbon whiskey stored in charred new containers, but for 2 years or more. You store it for 1 year and 364 days. It's not straight bourbon whiskey. Blended whiskey is another one. It's whiskey produced by blending straight whiskey or blend of straight whiskeys and whiskey of any type and or neutral spirits. So to have blended whiskey, you must have some portion of straight whiskey. You can optionally have other whiskeys in the blend, or you can add neutral spirits, basically vodka, to it. Scotch whiskey, which is unblended whiskey produced in Scotland in compliance with the laws of the United Kingdom, and there's also blended Scotch whiskey. Canadian whiskey, unblended whiskey produced in Canada, compliance with its laws. There's also blended Canadian whiskey. Irish whiskey is another type that is specifically identified by TTB. If your whiskey is not specifically identified by TTB, which is basically anything except for Scotland, Ireland, Canada, and the United States, then your product is just whiskey, Japanese whiskey, malt whiskey. So this is not an exhaustive list. 27 CFR 5.22 goes through all of these types: whiskey, vodka, whiskey, brandies, rums, things like that. Next, another fun one to go through is the standard of identity for distilled spirits. So the government has, they're telling you how to make your margaritas. A margarita must have tequila, triple sec, and lime or lemon juice or oil or natural flavor. Daiquiri must have rum and lime juice or oil or natural flavor. Bloody Mary must have vodka and tomato juice or natural tomato flavor. A martini may only have gin and vermouth, but a vodka martini can have vodka and vermouth. Old-fashioned, straight bourbon whiskey and bitters. If you're using corn whiskey or unstraight whiskey, can't be classified as an old-fashioned. Manhattan, any type of whiskey and vermouth. Mai Tai, rum and citrus juices or oils or natural flavors. White Russian, vodka, coffee-flavored brandy, liqueur, and cream. And something called a pink squirrel, creme d'almond, creme de cacao, and cream. There are less than 30 recognized cocktails under TTB's rules. So if you, just Googling, you'll get thousands of different cocktails. So that doesn't mean you can't name your product one of those things, but it's not necessarily a recognized cocktail, so that you could, say margarita made with this or that. You would have to label your product as a distilled spirit specialty, which you need to then provide a complete and accurate statement of composition, but we'll get into that in a little bit. So the federal government definitely regulates how you make your margarita. Like, must have triple sec. If it doesn't have triple sec in it, it can't be a margarita. Must have lime juice. Now there are there's a subset of flavored margarita, so you could have a strawberry flavored margarita, but you better have lime juice in it or lemon juice. You can't call it a strawberry margarita, like the ready-to-drink cocktails pre-made, unless there is tequila, triple sec, lime or lemon juice in it, and then you can add your strawberry.